Barrie.
Welcome to Educate, Inform, and Challenge. My name is Teresa MacLennan. I'm the Executive Director of the Women and Children's Shelter of Barrie. We are so glad that you have joined us today. As you know, the goal of our program is to talk about the lives and experiences of women. We talk about violence against women, human trafficking. We also talk about women in leadership and decision-making. We always try to highlight women who are doing great work in our community that supports and encourages the voice of other women. And so again, so glad that you've joined us today. Before we begin, we do want to acknowledge and thank our Indigenous community and leaders for allowing us to share in this space, to have these conversations on these sacred lands. We thank you so much. So today I'm honored to welcome my guest, Kirsten Bradley, who is from BDO, and we're going to be talking about all things finances today. And I am really looking forward to this talk because it is an area that is not strong for me. And I think that as women, we tend not to, really focus and pay a lot of attention maybe to our finances, and that should change. And the more we can educate and inform ourselves, the better. And so welcome, Kirsten. I'm so glad to talk with you today.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be able to reach out and speak to women, especially about their finances.
Terrific, terrific. So let's dive in. Talk to us specifically about the work you do at BDO.
Okay. Well, I work for BDO Canada, and my job is as a financial insolvency administrator. So what I do is I work with people who are actually struggling with their debt, struggling to make ends meet, and help them find a path that's going to lead them into a little bit of a relief, a little bit of a guidance to get back on track and get back moving forward financially.
So would that be, let's say, a young woman who has considerable student loan debt?
So it would actually be all ages. It really is the full spectrum from, as you said, someone who's just out of university, out of college, dealing with debts, dealing with credit cards, the mistakes, as I call it, of our youth. Sometimes we forget to make some payments on our cell phones or take out payday loans or different areas like that, right through to someone who's dealing with moving forward into retirement. Their income has now dropped. They're significantly less than they expected. And now they're dealing with trying to make ends meet on a much lower income base than they ever expected.
This is going to be a great conversation. So I really want to dive into that work that you do and how you actually do that. But I'm very curious to ask you about what some of the situations are, or the majority of situations are that you're seeing. Are they folks who are primarily looking at retirement, or folks who have some kind of a medical illness that need to adjust their finances? Like, really, who are the clientele that you see the most?
As I said, it is full spectrum. Financial struggles can infect anybody. And I think this last few years through the pandemic, we saw that more than ever. People who thought that they were in a position that as long as that paycheck was coming in, they were going to be okay. Majority of Canadians are living paycheck to paycheck. And the reality of that is that when that paycheck stops, or when there's a health issue, when there's a divorce, when there's a death in the family, when we have children, there are so many things can impact how we move forward. So knowing that if we don't have a really nice cushion behind us and some investments and some savings, and we've set for our goals, we're going to run into a situation where that extra $200 charge for their car is going to put them into a financial struggle. Now we're dependent on our credit cards. Now we're reaching out to high interest payday loans. Anything, the littlest thing can break the cycle, and the next thing, they're not able to make their payments, and it can happen at any time.
So, Kirsten, I'm just really curious about that. What has changed? Because 20 years ago, would you have seen as many clients that were in this kind of financial predicament? And I'm sure that there's a lot of factors that are intersecting in asking that question.
Mm-hmm.
But what has changed for all of us?
Well, I think, obviously, realizing that there are a lot more women who are independently trying to run a family. There's the changes in sort of our income level and our expenses. Anyone who's gone to the grocery store is going to see our cost of living has gone up, but our income hasn't. So when there's no balance between the two, we're going to run into the issues. We're going to see that more and more people are struggling, and it, as you said, 20 years ago, we had a different impact here within our office for sure. It was definitely kind of a sort of set expectation of who you'd see walk through the door, and we don't see that anymore. It is full range. The stigma that used to be with having a bankruptcy or proposal is not a stigma anymore. People are regrowing and building their lives afterwards. So when people realize that and realize we're here to help take that stress off their shoulders, to take the weight that they're carrying. Because when you think of financial stress, we think of our mental health, the impact that we feel when we're carrying around a debt burden, when we aren't sure where our next paycheck's is it going to cover our rent? Is it going to cover our groceries? If you look at some of the recent surveys in terms of what Canadians right now are feeling compared to a couple years ago, we now know that over 50% of the population says they're losing sleep because of their debt. That wasn't something we saw, 20, 30 years ago, but we're seeing it more now.
And do you think that people are just not able to see a way out? Like they're losing hope and like you say, living paycheck to paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that that's where we're at, that we're feeling like there's no possible way to get out of this?
I think that's what happens. Unfortunately, it becomes a spiral. And when you start to feel with the high interest rates that are happening, when people are using their homes as ATM machines, because now we're depending on our home equity to be able to finance our lifestyle. So many different things are beginning to sort of take us on that spiral. When you feel like all you're doing is paying the minimum on your credit card every month, you got to get off that hamster wheel that I compare it to, because you're doing everything you can. And I think what people need to realize is they're not alone. When someone's watching this, if anyone's out there saying, well, that's me, you are not alone. That is right now. There are so many people who never thought that they'd be in this position, who just cannot they're working hard and they're living very lean, but they still can't make things ends meet.
And I think that you have really just summed up the experience as parents that we see even our children going through, because they are carrying student debt, they are living paycheck to paycheck, they're working, and they also make lifestyle choices, right? Mm-hmm. But needing to max out credit cards and getting more credit cards to be able, like a card that they can use to purchase groceries.
Right.
And making those difficult decisions about, do I pay my rent or, and wanting to live a life that they see most people maybe can't afford, like going to Tim Hortons or Starbucks every day, right?
Yeah.
And having to make some lean choices can be very, very difficult. And some opt not to. Right. But I think, what you're saying is you've just spoken to so many of our viewers, right, who have children who are struggling or struggling themselves, right? So
exactly.
I'm really looking forward to our discussion and just also talking about how do you rebuild some hope and to educate folks to know that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, right? And so I think that that's what, we're really going to dive into today. I am very curious about the amount of women that you may work with and what the nature of their need is when they come to see you.
So, as I said, financial impact can happen to anyone. The idea that, life events. But I think, unfortunately, and this has been going back to the beginning of time, really, when we think of the fact that, the idea that back in 1970s, a woman could not get a credit card unless they had one under their husband's name. That wasn't that long ago. And to think, as women, we've been trying to grow and become independent and build, but there's still so much of no one talks about their finances. We don't talk to our parents about our budgeting. We don't talk to our children about our financial struggles. We don't talk. That's the problem. We need to talk. We need to share. We need to voice and get that expertise and reach out to professionals to be able to know, where do I go from here? What is my next course of action? Because there are solutions. And I think that's where, when I see women come in, I see them having gone through divorces, having gone through spousal deaths, having gone through health issues, loss of job. It really can happen at any time. And even the best laid plans can run into some barriers. So, when you don't think that's ever going to happen to you, that's when you sort of see the impact that not being prepared is going to have.
Yeah, I agree with you, because certainly you can make plans for your financial future, let's say, and you think it's going to look one way, and then you have a death, your spouse, right, your partner, or let's say a significant illness that changes that trajectory completely, and somebody has to stop working, right? And it really does feel like how you're describing this weight of debt that so many folks carry is heavy, and it seems like it's a vicious circle to try and get out of. So I think it'll be really great to hear just how folks can do that. And I really appreciate what you're saying about declaring bankruptcy, because years and years ago, I always heard things that once you declare bankruptcy, you're never going to be able to get a loan. You're never going to be able to get a mortgage again. But that's not the case anymore, is it?
It's not the case. And it's not, I think the biggest thing when people come in, I will often say, let's not call it bankruptcy. Let's just call it the B word, or let's come up with, something better, that we're going to do a better choice to move forward, because bankruptcy holds a stigma. We all carry it. We think about it. We see it in movies. A lot of people make a comparison to the American version, very different in Canada. And knowing that there is a way of rebuilding. The greatest thing I see when people come in and they have carried this weight for months or years or decades, and they come in and they finally go, that's it? That's all I have to do? And it's gone? That's it. There are set responsibilities, set duties, expectations you have to complete, but it's done. And I often, will say, when you walk out this door, you've taken it off. Undo the weight that you've been carrying, because we're going to work you through this, and you're going to rebuild. And I have people who, in consumer proposals, they keep their properties, they keep their assets, this very misguided information about what they think happens during a bankruptcy proposal, that we're going to come in and take everything and they're going to, nothing. That's not the case at all. So knowing that is important.
That's perfect. You know what? I'm going to put a pin right there, and we're going to pick this conversation back up when we return from our short break. We just really encourage our viewers to stay with us so that we can all learn more about this and know that Kirsten's here to help us and to build hope about our financial outlook. Okay, so stay with us. We'll be right back.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
It's about sharing and caring. It's about doing and belonging. It's about living life to its fullest. And it's about laughing out loud. We are L'Arche Canada, and we're about witnessing and sharing the gifts of all people. Learn more about us today.
What kind of show do you want to see on Rogers TV? What interests you? Log on to rogerstv.com, fill out a show proposal, and tell us about your segment idea. We want to know what you want to see. Rogers TV, only on Rogers.
Welcome back to Educate, Inform, and Challenge. Again, my name's Teresa from the Women and Children's Shelter of Barrie. We're having a great discussion today about our finances, and we've been talking about the debt that so many of us can carry and experience in our life. And sometimes it just causes us to lose hope. We don't know how we're going to get out of debt. We don't know how we're going to have a healthy financial future. How do we look towards buying a house? You know, those sorts of things, right? So Kirsten is really helping us today. So she's going to walk us through how she provides support to any one of us. So Kirsten, I'm a woman. I have a lot of debt. I have a lot of credit cards, and I'm struggling to pay my bills. So I come in to see you. Walk me through the process of how you're going to help me and what can I expect?
Okay. Well, nowadays, one of the first things is that we actually are able to do initial assessments in the office or virtually. So one thing that's happened with the pandemic is it's made our life a little more flexible in terms of being able to reach out and reach people anywhere at any time. So if someone was to come into my office, the very first thing is we're going to take a look at this situation. Now, every person's going to be very different, whether your assets, your income, your family size, all of those things are going to dictate what sort of direction or what path is going to be the best for you, because we want to make sure we're doing something that's right for what you need. In some cases, we will do a full assessment and look at the debts and look at the income and realize, we can help you with just coming up with a budget that's going to work. Let's set some goals. Let's pay this off and figure out a plan to get this paid off. It doesn't necessarily mean that just because you come to see us, you're going to file something. No, we can come up with some other solutions. And I love when that happens, because you see the sort of, why didn't I learn to budget before this? And that's so important. So if someone does come into a situation where we know there's no choice, we have to move into a bankruptcy, then what we look at is the idea that you're moving forward. We're looking at the liabilities. We've checked out what the assets are, and then we say, okay, if you're in a situation where we're going to do a simple bankruptcy. A simple bankruptcy nowadays, when someone has never filed a bankruptcy before, is a 9-month process. Very short. And for any women out there, that's a pregnancy, which we know goes by like that. So it's done in 9 months. During that 9 months, you have some duties, some responsibilities, but these are really going to help. We have you complete income and expense forms for us, which help us then to do 2 counseling sessions. And this is my favorite part of this whole process, is that I'll sit down with someone and we'll do some counseling. We're going to talk about budgeting. We're going to talk about setting those goals. And the goals are so key to our future, because everyone talks about emergency goals. We all know about emergency goals. But what I like to talk about is what I call the someday goals. And those someday goals are the things that if you are sitting having a glass of wine with a friend saying, oh, someday I would love to do this. What are we doing to make someday happen? So along with coming up with a plan that's going to get you moving forward, it's going to get rid of your debt, you're also setting those goals. We also go into a second counseling that talks all about credit rebuilding, because as you mentioned, you're not going to be just stuck with carrying a big, sign that says I'm bankrupt. You're going to start moving forward. As soon as you're discharged from a bankruptcy, you can start rebuilding your credit. And people don't realize that there's the whole idea that for 6-7 years, it's going to sit on my report and I can do nothing. That's not the case. There are choices and decisions you can make that are going to actually help you rebuild. You can get a credit card again. You can mortgage a home in the future. You can purchase a vehicle. All of those things can happen. And nowadays, with it not being such a sort of rare event, it's seen by most of the financial institutions that, okay, you've cleared things, you're moving forward, and we're going to help you.
So it can actually be a really good option for someone. And there is such a stigma, a shame, a guilt, I think that, folks used to feel when they were needing to say, I declared bankruptcy, but that's not the case anymore.
It's not. And I think the thing that people need to know is nowadays, it really has become almost a norm. There's when you are struggling and you're feeling that you can't go, any further, and there are no loans available, and there's and you're depending on some of these payday loans that are 35% interest rates. Those are the never loan. You're not going to get out of those. By coming to see us, we'll come up with a plan, and then you're moving forward. The idea is to push you forward so that you're leaving with a better credit score, with a better, forecast for your future. And that's what we want.
Before someone may make that decision or land in terms of bankruptcy, let's say I come to you and I'm carrying a huge amount of debt, but are there any kind of debt relief programs or things that reduce some of that debt, and that might be the option you look at before bankruptcy? Do they even exist? I don't even know.
There are some programs out there. My take on them is you have to be very cautious, because right now a lot of companies are out there who say that they are licensed by the Canadian government. They're not. What they've done is they've been able to obtain a name that, just like if you were opening up a construction company, you get a license through the Canadian government. So they're not licensed. Only a licensed insolvency trustee, which is similar to what BDO does, where we have licensed insolvency trustees that can actually legally, under federal protection, put you into a situation where you are protected from your creditors. No other program will allow for that. And that's where the bankruptcy is one option, but a consumer proposal is where you are making payments to those creditors. You're coming up with a payment plan that's interest-free and open-ended. So again, another option where if there is a situation where, the debt is something that needs to be paid back or handled differently, we can also come up with that plan. And that's also helping to rebuild, but it's also protecting you from your creditors.
So it sounds like folks really need to be mindful and do their research in terms of who they are coming to help them. Because
Definitely.
Those other places that aren't licensed, who are out there, what will end up happening for folks if they go to those places?
Well, one, there's going to be a significant larger cost. When in terms of fees, we are federally mandated by the Office of Superintendent of Bankruptcy. So our fees are defined by that. So you're protected under that. So no one can charge you exorbitant amounts. A lot of these companies will ask for an upfront fee. Well, when you're already struggling financially, how are you supposed to come up with thousands of dollars to start a process? That shouldn't be the case. So that's one piece that they look at. The other is that it all depends on who agrees to the terms that they come up with. So under a sort of a consolidation from one of these consolidation companies, you can have various debts who then turn around and say, I was never agreeing to this. And they can come back and continue garnishments and trying to seize their funds.
This is great information, Kirsten. So I want to circle back now. So let's say I decide with your consultation that bankruptcy is the way for me to go. What does that look like for me? How do you rebuild after that?
Well, the first thing is obviously coming up with a budget. And I think that for anybody, everybody, we should be looking at our budget, understanding what we are truly spending. The idea of being able to go out and should we choose to go to Tim Hortons every day or choose to get that coffee. One of the things I'll often say in my counselings is if you went out and did that every single day, you're looking at spending $60 in a month. Would you ever go to a grocery store and buy a $60 can of coffee? You wouldn't do it. But we're okay to do that because we don't think of small change as being a big outcome. $2.75 a day is $1,000 saved in a year. What would you do with $1,000?
I could do a lot with $1,000.
That's right. So if you can come up with that and be able to start really focusing on building that, where would your future go? we can sort of make a plan. And I think in filing a bankruptcy where you've taken the weight of this debt you've been trying to sleeplessly deal with for such a long period of time, and for women who are going through divorces or deaths or just being single, they're trying to do this on their own. And today, with the cost of housing and rent and everything else, when you're tying that into trying to pay off debt as well, it can often be overwhelming.
So when you declare bankruptcy, is all of your debt erased? Is that?
So there are some debts that we call actually under Section 178 of the Bankruptcy Act. So there's a special section that does sort of include some areas that we can't get rid of, but it's a pretty small number of items. So majority, credit cards, payday loans, lines of credit, all of those things are things that we can take care of, including student loans. If they're over 7 years, those are debts that can be taken care of. Debts right now, we see a lot when it comes to people getting notices that CRA is asking for their CERB payments back. That's a debt that we can take care of. So then that's something that I think is unfortunately affecting a lot of people as well.
That is very helpful information, because I am sure there's lots of folks listening today who are in that exact situation. And I just don't think that people realize that they actually have options to help them with the debt that they're carrying for years and years and years. And I'm wondering if you see this kind of multi-generational debt. Like, I mean, the debt of the parents becomes the debt of the children, becomes the debt of their children. Do you see that it actually can be passed down?
There are some debts that can kind of fall under that. And there's a lot of times where people will come and see us for exactly that reason. They don't want to carry this forward to move on with this. Yeah. So, it really is an option that I think people need to not be so afraid of. We're here I quite literally can hold somebody's hand through this and help them through that process. And all of the staff here is like that.
And it must just be reassuring for someone who comes to see you and they're desperate. And what a humbling thing to do, to come and maybe looking at bankruptcy and asking for help, but then you walk with them and you walk them through that process. This has just been such helpful information, Kirsten. Our time has gone by so incredibly fast, and I know that there's so much more that we could talk about. We only have a couple of minutes left, but if there's someone who's listening today and they are in this predicament and they do not know what they're going to do, what would you say to them? What is the first step for them?
I think the first step is make the call. Reach out and reach out to any professional who's there to help. We do consultations that no cost. And as I said, if it comes down to just being able to sit down with you and work through your budget, that's what I'm here to do. I can be contacted through either online. We are Barrie BDO Debt Solutions. We have a website that has a lot of great information on it, and provides tons of even budgeting tools and sort of seeing what your risk right now is. If you'd like to reach me directly, is 705-712-1618.
Kirsten, thank you so much for the information you've shared with all of us today. Very educational and insightful, and I think you offer hope to so many who are listening today, and I appreciate that so much. We hope you'll join us again so that we can continue on to educate, inform, and challenge. Take care, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.